becomes the top European Union migrant destination as Italy is accused of causing deaths at sea. Democratic Republic of Congo President Joseph Kabila announces new elections in December, but no word on his plans to run. And we'll hear from the exciting Cameroonian Afrobeat rapper Reflex. Africa 54 starts right now.
Good evening, I'm Esther Gidu. You are in for Vincent Makori. This is Africa 54. The European migrant crisis continues to cause difficulty for several EU nations. Italy is rejecting criticism of its hardline policy on immigration after protesters marched on the Italian Interior Ministry, accusing it of being responsible for the deaths of migrants at sea. Rome has banned non-governmental organizations, charity boats from disembarking migrants in Italian ports. As Henry Ridgewell reports, new figures show Italy's clampdown is having an effect on the numbers, with Spain now overtaking Italy as the #1 destination for migrants in the European Union.
In Rome Wednesday, protesters marched on the Interior Ministry using red paint to accuse the Italian government of having blood on its hands. It follows the discovery this week by a Spanish rescue charity of a destroyed migrant boat floating in the Mediterranean off Libya. Amid the wreckage were the bodies of a woman and child. Another woman was rescued alive. NGOs accused the Libyan Coast Guard of abandoning the migrants.
This is the direct consequence of not allowing NGOs which rescue lives in the Mediterranean to work there. This is the consequence.
Italy's government, a coalition between the far-right League Party and the populist Five Star Movement, has blocked NGO rescue boats from docking in Italian ports. Earlier this week, Italy also forced 5 other European nations to share out 450 migrants rescued by Italian government vessels after Rome initially refused to take them all in. Interior Minister Matteo Salvini wrote on Twitter, "Firmness and coherence pay off."
My objective is to save everyone, to aid everyone, to heal everyone, to feed everyone, but to avoid that everyone comes to Italy.
Figures from the EU's border agency Frontex show 3,000 migrants used the central Mediterranean route to Italy and Malta last month, down 87% from June 2017.
The figures had already dropped very much under the previous government due to a set of deals that Italy had struck with Libya. Indeed, the arrivals had dropped very sharply. Now, of course, the policy of preventing NGO boats from docking has led to an even further decrease. But more than that, it's led to a very strong political win for the League, especially because other European countries have now been forced to take in some of the migrants arriving in Italy.
The United Nations says 1 in 7 migrants making the crossing has drowned since Italy introduced the ban on NGO boats. Italy's hard line has reduced numbers, but at a tragic cost. The EU is struggling to formulate a response, says Scazzieri.
The ideas that are currently on the table are these of external processing of applications, of strengthening the role of Frontex, and even of more internal burden sharing. And these debates will go ahead, while at the same time the ambiguity on what Italy does, I think, will remain.
Spain overtook Italy as the country receiving the highest number of migrants in June, with 6,400 arrivals. But Spain is unlikely to become a major crossing point.
Because the departure point on the African side would be Morocco, which is actually, unlike Libya, not a near-failed state.
Overall, the total number of so-called irregular migrant crossings into the EU in the first half of 2018 was just over 60,000, a fall of almost half from a year ago. Henry Ridgewell for VOA News, London.
Now, our next story shows that all most migrants want is an opportunity to work and be a productive member of their new country. In 2010, Agitu Idea Gudeta was forced to flee her native Ethiopia to Italy. In the years since then, she has built up a thriving business making goat cheese and beauty products. Her experience is a shining example of what migrants can do for their new countries if given a chance. But the 40-year-old Gudeta fears growing hostility to newcomers in Italy will make it harder for outsiders to contribute in the future. She escaped from Addis Ababa after her protests against so-called land grabbing, where huge swaths of farmland were sold to foreign investors, raised the ire of the local authorities. Ironically, in Italy, she was able to use common land in the northern mountains to build her new enterprise, taking advantage of permits that give farmers access to public land to prevent local territory from being reclaimed by wild nature. Now, Libya is rejecting a European Union plan to establish migrant centers in the country to stop asylum seekers arriving in Western Europe, saying it will not be swayed by financial inducements. Libyan Prime Minister Fayez al-Sarraj said Friday his country is absolutely opposed to Europe officially wanting Libya to accommodate illegal immigrants that the EU does not want to take in. Libya is a main departure point for migrants trying to reach Europe, often on flimsy inflatable boats provided by smugglers that often spring leaks or break down. Last month, Italy proposed reception and identification centers for migrant processing in Africa as a means to resolve divisions among European governments over how to handle an influx of more than 1 million migrants since 2015. The United Nations Human Rights Office says it is deeply concerned about a spike in intercommunal violence in Mali, which has led to serious human rights abuses by militia groups. The Human Rights Office says at least 289 civilians have been killed in 99 incidents of communal violence since the start of the year, and more than 75% of the incidents occurred in Mali's central Mopti region, with more than half taking place since May 1st. The communal violence across the country threatens a presidential election set for July 29th. The UN Human Rights Director in Mali, Julia Mengefa, says they have investigated reports of targeted killings between communities.
We have received information. We have sent missions to the field, which concluded that communities have established and created militia, and then those militias have been responsible to serious abuses against members of some communities.
Malian voters are hoping for a peaceful change after 6 years of political unrest, jihadist attacks, and ethnic clashes. The president of the Democratic Republic of Congo, Joseph Kabila, says a presidential election has been set for December 23rd, but did not say what his political plans are. Kabila told the nation in a televised speech Thursday he unequivocally respects the constitution, but the opposition says it fears he may try to hold on to power.
In my understanding, the Constitution says that the head of state has 2 terms, and therefore, we can't expect him to run.
Kabila's 2-term limit as an elected leader ended in 2016, but violence, armed militias, and problems organizing a new vote have twice derailed a new election. Kabila has led the DRC since his father, Laurent Kabila, was assassinated in 2001. Now, all week long, we've brought you various stories on Nelson Mandela's legacy, commemorating what would have been his 100th birthday. Today, we are wrapping up our coverage on Madiba's legacy with our guest, Leon Hartwell. Hartwell is a South African political analyst who has written extensively on Madiba's impact on the world. Leon, welcome to Africa 54.
Thank you for having me.
I'm just thinking about you as someone who grew up in South Africa during the apartheid, how best you can sum up Madiba's legacy and his impact not only for South Africa but the rest of the world.
I think obviously there are many different interpretations of Nelson Mandela's legacy. My personal interpretation is that personally he was, I grew up with the idea that he was my terrorist. But at some point that changed, when he was let out of jail and suddenly this man was throwing his fist into the air, but everything that came out of his mouth, we just wanted to hang on to that. And he constantly tried to emphasize this idea of liberty and democracy and so on, and I think he lived in that way too.
And I'm just wondering, does everybody then in South Africa see him that way? Does everybody celebrate what Mandela stood for?
I don't think so. I think there are many. His legacy right now is very much contested. And one of the reasons is because of deep inequality in South Africa. It's the highest in the world. The unemployment rates are extremely high. You know, officially it's 26%, but I think it's higher. And then you have a population of 50% plus that lives on less than $5 a day. So, you know, and in that context, some people are asking, can we eat democracy? Can we eat liberty? These are ideas that we closely associate with Nelson Mandela, and therefore his legacy, I think, also becomes tainted in the process.
So what are some of the answers maybe that South Africans should be able to hear? What do they really want to hear that they can be able to work with, given the situation that you just described? There's still discrepancy. There are communities that are going through a very difficult time, and they are not able to get to see that democracy really translate into something tangible for their personal lives.
Well, I think, you know, unfortunately, some politicians in South Africa are capitalizing on the fact that there are these deep inequalities, and so they're trying to move the debate further towards the left, a much more radical agenda. But I think there are others, even who live in very difficult circumstances, who still believes in Nelson Mandela, like I do.
Now, you know, this week we've seen the former U.S. President Barack Obama go
Yes.
to South Africa. First of all, he was chosen as the key speaker to deliver a lecture there, as well as, you know, interact with South Africans. What do you make of his speech, and how did people react to that?
He gave a beautiful speech, and I would highly recommend that you read it or even watch it, which is better. I think he was warmly welcomed by and large. There were some who were, you know, focusing on some of the rhetoric related to, you know, well, Mandela wasn't as great as you say, but Barack Obama largely focused on two things, equality and justice, which is what Nelson Mandela, I think, meant to him. And I think his speech came at a very timely period, you know, because the world is so divided right now. Here in the United States, you know, there are massive issues with the politics of identity. And if we look in South Africa, there are similar issues, you know. So these are the type of things that we have to talk about. And Obama reminded us that if the economic situation seems to be dire and we're not flourishing, then it does have an impact, I think, also on the political situation and how we relate to these ideas.
And personally, very briefly, what did Madiba mean to you?
To me, you know, the greatest way I can summarize it is that this idea that Mandela said that I am not free if someone else is not free, and he is not free if I'm not free. And so it's this idea of Ubuntu, which nicely comes together, you know, this idea of I am because you are. And so we're intimately connected with one another in a certain way. And you know, my favorite quotation of Nelson Mandela that kind of sums it up is when he said, to be free is not merely to cast off one's chains, but to live in a way that enhances the freedom of others.
Leon, well said. Thank you so much for being on Africa 54 to wrap it up for us.
Thank you, Esther.
Leon Hartwell is a South African political analyst. We want to know what you think about Africa 54 and the stories we cover. Join the conversation on Facebook. The address is Africa 54. We're also streaming our show live on Facebook, so check us out and share our show with your friends. Still ahead on Africa 54, President Donald Trump invites Vladimir Putin to another summit, this time in Washington. But first, a look at Friday's headlines.
In the Democratic Republic of Congo, President Joseph Kabila says there will be a presidential election on December 23rd, but he didn't divulge his political plans. In Mali, the UN Human Rights Office reports that nearly 300 civilians have been killed this year in fighting between rival militias. In Niger, President Mahamadou Issoufou meets with French defense minister who visited to discuss the regional counterterrorism force known as G5 Sahel. In Ethiopia, the country's first waste-to-energy plant is set to open this year, boosting energy production while worrying those who make a living on scavenging in the dump site. Finally, in Morocco, a local NGO invites divers to volunteer to clean up the seabed of Sal Marina, one of the many beaches in the countries polluted by litter.
U.S. President Donald Trump is inviting Russian President Vladimir Putin to a second summit meeting. The announcement came as the storm of criticism and confusion that followed the first summit is still making headlines and getting the attention of the U.S. Congress. Here to explain is VOA's Caroline Presutti at the White House.
Against the fallout from their first private meeting in Helsinki, news that these two leaders are planning to meet again for a second summit, this time in Washington. White House Press Secretary Sarah Huckabee Sanders on Thursday, tweeting, "Those discussions are already underway." This as the president faces backlash over comments he made after the Helsinki meeting, when he disagreed with his own intelligence community and seemed to accept Vladimir Putin's claim that Russia did not interfere in the 2016 elections, which he later retracted.
I don't see any reason why it would be.
The sentence should have been, I don't see any reason why it wouldn't be Russia.
Both Republicans and Democrats were outraged. Republican Senator Jeff Flake.
When you don't call out the Russian president for a blatant untruth that was said, then we're lending him support.
Also on Capitol Hill, Democrats introduced a bill blaming Russia.
If we do not take any action, the American people may not trust the outcome of the next election.
To underscore that point, the administration's Secretary on Homeland Security warned about the Russian threat in November's midterm elections.
We should all be prepared, given that capability and will, that they'll do it again.
House Minority Leader Nancy Pelosi says the president missed an opportunity to hold Russia accountable.
Putin appears to be President Trump's puppeteer. And that day in Helsinki, he shined the light on the strings.
Russian President Vladimir Putin called this week's summit with President Trump a success. He blames U.S. politics for denigrating it. Caroline Presutti, VOA News at the White House.
And welcome back to Africa 54. Here's what's trending. Angola has turned into Africa's third biggest economy and the continent's few upper middle income states. High-end designer clothes and luxury labels have a growing market here, and industry players see this as a key frontier for fashion. But Angola is one of the world's most unequal countries in the world, with most Angolans in the capital, Luanda, living on less than $2 a day. At the recent Angola Fashion Week, organizers said they were aiming to make fashion count as a burgeoning investment market, much in the same way it does for South Africa. Africa has more millionaires than Russia, but for many wealthy Africans, shopping for designer handbags or luxury watches still means traveling to New York or Europe. Next up, a first-ever driverless shuttle has debuted in New York's Times Square. The Baxi electric bus fitted with special high-tech sensors is designed for airports, college campuses, theme parks, or downtown urban centers, or anywhere that a 20-mile-an-hour or less vehicle will work for pedestrians. The vehicle can fit up to 20 people with its seats taken out. While Coast Autonomous is just a year old, it's been working on its self-driving technology for 15 years and expects to deploy its first fleets by next year. And finally, ever dreamed of being Iron Man? Now you can. A jet suit created by a British former commodities trader has gone on sale in a London department store with a cool price tag of £340,000 or about $443,000. The Gravity Industries suit is made up of 5 miniature jet engines mounted on the pilot's arms and back, and also of electronics and 3D printed parts, with a speed record of 51 kilometers per hour, an altitude limit of over 3,600 meters. Anybody who decides to buy a suit will also be offered training. and that's what's trending today. And it's Music Makers Friday, and today we are featuring Cameroonian Afrobeat rapper Atou Mba, known by the stage name Reflex. Atou's music features powerful lyrics and awesome vibes. His latest album, Summer Jollof, includes 5 songs and is named for the rice dish enjoyed across West Africa. Atou joins me in the studio to tell us more about his music. Atou, welcome to Africa 54 for the very first time here, right?
Yes, yes, yes.
Now, tell me how you got started.
I started writing poetry, just writing poetry, helping out my homeboys in Cameroon, get girls. That was the thing. And then it transformed into music, put it on the beat, and yeah, it just took off from there. Yeah.
And I see that your newest album is named, you know, Summer Jollof.
Yeah.
Now, what inspired that title, really?
It's just, you know, the whole Jollof war right now between Nigeria, Ghana, and Cameroon. You know, me being from Cameroon, it's just, you know, it's a vibey song. Jollof is sweet, you know, it's good food. So it's just good food translating to good music. So I just wanted to make something that people can vibe to for the summer, and it's been having a lot of praise. So I really enjoy it.
Now we have summer here in the U.S., so we might be able to hear the music as well as eat some of that, right?
Right, yeah. It's winter in Africa.
What are the variations then in terms of how you make it in Cameroon as opposed to how it is made in Nigeria?
I think the Nigerian is more like reddish, you know, like heavily tomato based. Cameroon is more white. I know people right now listening is like, oh my goodness, here we go. I'm not eating no Cameroon jollof, but you know, I enjoy it all, and like,
So going back to your country of Cameroon, I'm just wondering what kind of music influenced your decision to get into rapping music? Because much of Africa, rap music came from the U.S. to start with, from African Americans, and it's caught up everywhere.
Yeah, and I remember growing up listening to MTV back in Cameroon, but my dad, he was a great, you know, consumer of music growing up, and he played all sorts of music. He especially played Congolese music, OK jazz, but of course, you know, me being interested in urban music and listening to, like, you know, Nelly all the way back in like the 90s, early 90s, or late 90s, early 2000s, and I felt like that was where, you know,
the older generation would listen to. I used to hear my brothers play the Jim Reeves and all those, like country music. So how does your father and other people now relate to rap? And probably you should rap for us. Can you rap something for me?
Put me on the spot, but it's all good. I do something, you know, something light. I told a girl, don't be insecure. Just hold on to a brother, baby, and be sure. Love way I give you now, you never see before. I'm gonna make another form like I know be yours. Baby, either or. I'm just out here trying to get it, really. Hardly be around, now you made it, really. Your friends be talking smack, but they don't get it, silly. But I'ma put a rock on that hand, milly. Charlie do me, I do you, man no go vex. Got me bumping love songs to ease up the stress. If Najano the carry last, you know so you be fast. Emi Rama la la go la febo ko de yes.
Oh my goodness, you're just wonderful. And, can you rap in Cameroonian language?
I rap in like 4 different languages. Twi, Ghana language, French, English, and Awing. Shout out to Awing. That's where I'm from.
So what is the next for you in this career?
Just doing a lot of festivals, a lot of shows. We have the Cameroon Music Festival coming up in Silver Spring next week, the 28th, and so just you know, doing more traveling, doing Toronto in next month, and just, you know, just having fun with it and see where it goes.
So if people want to learn more about your music also, I'm wondering, where do we get you? Are you on Facebook? Are you on any other social media?
Like I said, just dropped the new project, Summer Jollof. You can find it on any streaming platform. And also I'm on SoundCloud. I'm on Twitter, Instagram, at I Am Reflex. It's the same name on every platform. I try to, you know, keep it tight so people can find me easy. So it's at I Am Reflex.
I want to see if we can play a little bit of that music, but you know, and again, how is it received here in the U.S., especially within the African diaspora, the kind of rap music that you're doing here?
It's oddly like received very well. You know, like we have people coming from Cameroon for the festival, you know, to do a festival here, and you know, there's a huge African population here, you know, in the DMV area, DC, Maryland, Virginia, Houston, Texas, Atlanta. So I was just telling somebody before I walked in the studio, I'm focused here. The audience is growing, people loving it, and we'll see if, you know, if I make enough ripple effect here, it can take me back home.
And you're making some good dollars,
right? You know, it's paying some bills, so I'm grateful for that.
It's paying bills.
Yeah, I'm grateful for that.
So I actually did hear that there is a group of Cameroonian artists coming to perform here in DC, and we hope that some of them will make it right here on Africa 54.
Yeah. We can arrange that.
Okay, as long as you're making money, and the music is getting very good reception. We're gonna maybe hear some of that music. Summer Jollof.
Summer Jollof, yeah.
And we hope that you can come back again and actually perform for us.
I really appreciate you having me here, definitely. I'll be back anytime.
And for the upcoming younger artists from Cameroon and the rest of Africa, your advice, real quick?
Yeah, just, just follow your passions. I know growing up, especially in an African household, you're encouraged to either be a doctor, lawyer, engineer, or, you're a disgrace to the family. And to be honest, it wasn't really well received in my family. But, once the checks started coming in, parents was like, all right, there's something in here. But yeah, just follow your dreams and don't be stupid. So just do something good and it'll take off, yeah.
Thank you so much. You're wonderful. I hope you come back soon.
Thank
you so much for coming by.
Thank you.
And so thank you, Reflex. We'll leave you with some of his awesome vibes in this song, Nonstop. From all of us here in Washington, have a great weekend.
Dangerous, I'm nice but the flow so dangerous. They're mad cause they just can't hang with us. And the miss all the shots they aim at us. Don't test me, I'm next B. Reflex, better call me Flexi. It's simple, it's not complex. Haters hate but I know go vex. Please, just grind like I'm supposed to. Read the Bible and then I follow through. Put an extra hours, I'm blessed with power. Send a runner to the hitters, I told you. Get shot on Dequa, I don't smoke weed, no reefer. Nyongo said na Lupita, one day I go most to meet her. Y'all know that I am the best out. I need a competition, not stressed out. And your favorite rappers, them left out. I'm the rookie that the best fear now. No subliminal, no, me not rap Jehovah. You the game that said and we taking over. Listen up, boys, see mine, I soldier. This ninja sweet and I call him soda, No awards, never even been on tour. See my hustle pure, a boy not be smart. I eat a beat raw like I'm carnivore. Flesh die, daily life is a war. I ball hard, boys, y'all keeping score. There we use no else, I don't play for draw. Jesus the Lord, don't open door, No stop, this one that I hip hop. No stop, just watch when the beat drops. No stop, this one that I hip hop. No stop, just dance when the beat drops. Just now when the beat drops. Just dance when the beat drops. Just now when the beat drops. Just dance when the beat drops. Just now when the beat drops. Just dance when the beat drops. Just now when the beat drops. This one that I hip hop. Let me get some elbow room. I dance like I am from Cameroon. Storms kill the beat and I brought the hit. It's lit. No stop. See, I know they find me no palava. So why did they bring me this wahala? Man, they know if you rap, but they holla. I school this young, it's like I am the father. Say 1, 2, walk on my shoe. 3, 4, open the door. 5, 6, pick up sticks. 7, 8, don't play your head. Your song the boy and your rap is poor. It don't excite me. I won't be back for more. Your song the boy and your rap is poor. It don't excite me. No stop, this one that I hip hop. No stop, just watch when the beat drops. No stop, this one that I hip hop. No stop, just dance when the beat drops. Just now when the beat drops. Just dance when the beat drops. Just now when the beat drops. Just dance when the beat drops. Just now when the beat drops. Just dance when the beat drops. Just now when the beat drops. This one that I hip hop.
Welcome to English in a Minute. A slope can describe a surface or area that is not level. If something is slippery, it is hard to stand on.
Slippery slope.
It sounds as if Jonathan and Anna will fall down. So, Jake came into the office late again.
He told me he has been drinking every night this week.